VacuBrand offers a VacuLand QC kit to help ensure a successful leak-tight installation and to avoid the need for rework in order to meet spec. We strongly suggest that you test the VacuLand network valves and connections as you go, rather than wait until the entire installation is complete. It is much easier to find and correct leaks among one or a few connections than in a complete network with numerous valves and connections, especially if the connections end up behind casework or sealed in walls or ceilings. A VacuLand network delivers vacuum that's about 100 times deeper than that on a central vacuum system. Because of that, it is critical that the network be nearly leak-free. Small leaks in a network operating at this level of vacuum have a much larger effect on system performance than small leaks on a central vacuum system. One word of caution: do not test your VacuLand installation with compressed air or water. Both will cause misleading results. The QC kit provides the tools you need to test your network. It includes a pump capable of producing 2 millibar vacuum, tubing with a silencer to quiet exhaust from the pump during testing, several lengths of vacuum tubing to connect the pump and gauge to vacuum lines and valves, a DVR2 digital vacuum gauge to test the installation, an adapter for larger pump models, a blind fitting for testing open networks, and finally instructions for using the QC kit. Start with attaching the silicone tubing with the silencer to the exhaust fitting under the pump. Then affix the short length of silicone tubing to the pump inlet. Connect the DVR2 vacuum gauge to the other end of the tubing and plug in the pump. Turn on the pump and allow it to warm up for a few minutes. Next, turn on the DVR2 gauge by pressing the top button on the rear of the gauge. The reading on the gauge should be the ultimate vacuum of the pump. Use this value as a baseline reference point for your leak testing process. A well-installed local vacuum network will provide vacuum at each turret that closely matches the ultimate vacuum of the pump. Depending upon the owner requirements of the project layout, an installation may be acceptable if the vacuum level at some turrets are as much as 5 millibar above the ultimate vacuum of the pump. Once you have recorded the vacuum at the pump, disconnect the DVR2 from the pump inlet and replace with a long section of silicone tubing. Inserting the semi-rigid PTFE network tubing into the other end of the silicone tubing far enough to make a good seal, about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Now use the short length of silicone tubing provided with your kit to connect the DVR2 vacuum gauge to the hose barb on the VacuLand turret closest to the pump. Be sure that all other vacuum turrets are in the off position by rotating the flow control knob at the top clockwise until it stops, or rotating the ball valve handle, if present, 90 degrees to the off position. Do not over-tighten the flow control knob. If you are testing a partially installed system, make sure that any open tubing runs are closed off. You can do this by either temporarily installing a blind fitting or creating a dead end loop using a compression tee and some extra tubing. Turn on the pump and the DVR2 vacuum gauge again and open the VacuLand valve. The gauge should move quickly to within 5 millibar of the designed specifications of the test pump, typically 2 millibar. If it does, this is a preliminary indication of a tight tubing network. Move sequentially through the network to more distant turrets, recording your results for each location. If the vacuum level is more than 5 millibar above the measured ultimate vacuum of the pump, this indicates there is a leak. Remember to check the connections to the pump itself as a possible source of leakage. If the pump is not the issue, continue to find the highest pressure reading on the network, which will be closest to the most significant leak. Make your corrections. Repeat this process until all vacuum turrets connected to the system are within 5 millibar of the pump's ultimate vacuum. Once all turrets are within specification, and with the gauge still connected to the vacuum port, open one other vacuum valve on the same branch of the VacuLand network. The reading on the gauge should change slowly and not spike. If there is a pressure spike, confirm that each VacuLand turret has a check valve properly installed. Once you have confirmed that the network can reach within 5 millibar of the pump's measured ultimate vacuum across the entire network, turn the pump off with the gauge still attached to the Vaculand valve. The reading on the pump gauge should remain relatively stable, since there's no longer a source of vacuum and no system is completely leak-free. The vacuum pressure on the gauge can be expected to rise 1 millibar every few seconds. If the vacuum pressure indicated on the gauge rises faster than 25 millibar per minute or 3 millibar per 6 seconds, especially if you see the reading spike hundreds of millibar per second, the network has a leak. Repeat the leak detection and correction process. If the pressure reading only drifts up slowly, 1 millibar per 2 seconds or less, the network is tight enough to function properly.